Hi, everyone. Welcome to the She-Wolves of Winter. We are so happy to have you tonight. We have Old Nan and Hiking with Stefi, and this is Ashley from the Iron Underneath. Old Nan, would you like to introduce yourself?
I think everybody pretty much knows who I am, but for those who haven't actually seen me before, I'm Old Nan. And thank you so much for coming out and joining us tonight.
Hi, I'm Stefi. Thanks for everyone in the chat for coming. Ion, BBM. I know we kept you guys waiting for a little while, but we're here now. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much for waiting. It's all my fault. I had internet problems, and I really apologize. Thanks for hanging in there with us. It's so appreciated. You guys are the best. So, Old Nan, you look beautiful. It's so good to see your face. Okay, so we're going to talk about Bran and Dance with Dragons. It's a huge subject. It's a great one, though. I have to say that this was like just reading the sweetest fantasy in the world. And at the same time, it was like reading almost the creation of the world in a way. But it was really beautiful, and it touched me in a lot of ways and made me think a lot about life and death and just how fleeting life is. So I thought the way we would start this maybe is just with a quote that I wanted to. It was actually something that came to me a while ago from Thunderclap. I want to give him some credit for this because he had told me once about his thoughts of how the Direwolves relate to the Jungle Book and Rudyard Kipling's Law of the Jungle. And so I wanted to start out by reading that because I think that it goes through the whole theme of Bran's chapters in this book. So I'll start with the Law of the Jungle by Kipling. Now this is the law of the jungle, as old and as true as the sky. And the wolf that shall keep it may prosper, but the wolf that shall break it must die. As the creeper that girdles the tree trunk, the law runneth forward and back. The law runneth forward and back, For the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. Wash daily from nose to tail to tip. Drink deeply, but never too deep. And remember the night is for hunting, and forget not the day is for sleep. The jackal may follow the tiger. When thy whiskers are grown, remember the wolf is a hunter. Go forth and get food of thine own. Keep peace with the lords of the jungle, the tiger, the panther, and bear. And trouble not Hathi the silent, and mock not the boar in his lair. When pack meets with pack in the jungle, and neither will go from the trial, lie down till the leaders have spoken. It may be fair words shall prevail. When we fight with a wolf of the pack, ye must fight him alone and afar, lest others take part in the quarrel, and the pack be diminished by war. The lair of the wolf is his refuge, and where he has made his home. Not even the head wolf may enter, not even the council may come. The lair of the wolf is his refuge, and where he has digged it too plain, the council shall send him a message, and so he shall chance it again. If ye kill before midnight, be silent and wake not the woods with your bay, lest ye frighten the deer from the crop, and your brothers go empty away. Yourselves and your mates, and your cubs as they need, and ye can, but kill not for the pleasure of killing, and 7 times never kill man. If ye plunder if ye plunder his kill from a weaker, devour not all in thy pride. Pack right is the right of the meanest, so leave him the head and the hide. The kill of the pack is the meat of the pack. Ye must eat where it lies, and no one may carry away of that meat to his lair, or he dies. The kill of the wolf is the meat of the wolf. He may do what he will. But till he is given permission, the pack may not eat of that kill. Cub right is the right of the yearling. From all of his pack he may claim full gorge when the killer has eaten, and none may refuse him the same. Lair right is the right of the mother. From all of her year she may claim one haunch of each kill for her litter, and none may deny her the same. Cave right is the right of the father, to hunt by himself for his own. He is freed of all calls to the pack. He is judged by the council alone. Because of his age and his cunning, because of his gripe and his paw, in all that the law leaveth open, the word of your head wolf is law. Now these are the laws of the jungle, and many and mighty are they, but the head and the hoof and the haunch and the hump is obey. So that's the law of the jungle. And as I read through Bran's chapters, I couldn't even believe how many times I felt that come up and heard it in different ways, you know. Seems even like the lair might be Winterfell, and you know, there's a lot of not killing man, 7 times never kill man. We even saw in this chapter when Summer meets One Eye and they get in their fight to see who's the head of the pack, and Summer wins, and that right there is the pack may not eat of that kill. So they all wait and to eat until Summer's done. So it was really, really cool, and I'll let you ladies talk about what you think. Who wants to go first? Nan, Stefi? I'm gonna catch you off guard.
Okay, I'll do it. Okay, so yeah, I found a lot of stuff, and actually before you even posted that, I was already like writing stuff that was so similar to it. The 7 times, for example, it like in Genesis, you hear of Cain and the 7th vengeance, or the 77th that Jesus mentions of praying and stuff like that. And the mark of Cain, if you break these rules that are given by God. So I found that very interesting. As obviously the whole thing has to do with laws and policies and the council and judges and but then your own free will and what you claim is yours, like your free will, which is basically your stuff, and the lines and how things do get into those bubbles in those cracks where you have to make sacrifices. Like if you hunt with the pack, you have to serve, like you have to eat with the pack, right? So I understood that. Involving solving conflicts privately, that was another thing that I found very interesting. Like, especially when you referred to Brynden Rivers, right? Like he made this thing a public thing by throwing the head of, I'm blanking out, but he threw a head on the table. So he made people choose where they stand in that moment, like through the Blackfire rebellions and all this stuff. So I definitely understood it in that regard, that your home is your land. But in that sense, also, you got to think of, let me find it for a second. Nan, you go for a second.
Okay, I was just thinking that as far as the wolf pack, we've got a wolf pack in Westeros, and that's in the north, what's left of it. And all of these things that you talked about, Ashley, we've also heard a lot of in the stories themselves, even in the Vermeer Sixskins, the prologue. You know, we see all of that. Don't eat men. There's so many of things that you talked about that are references in just if nowhere else in Varamir Sixskins chapter. But there's so much more, and we still got to. I still think Summer is a pretty bad dog, but I still think that when it comes down to it, Ghost will be the leader of the pack. And I liked what they said about their den being their home, and not even the leader of the pack can go in their home unless they're invited. And that sort of goes back to guest rights. If they're not invited, they can't come in. If they're not greeted with guest rights, they're not allowed. And the same thing applies to the wolf and their territories. The wolf's den, other leaders cannot come in to their den. And that's about all I had on that. Let y'all talk.
Stefi, did you want to talk about what you had quoted?
Yeah, okay, so yeah, I'll jump in really quickly because I'm almost done the points. Okay, so the wolf's den for me was and I'll bring this up later on as well. It reminded me of how supposedly the cave that they're in was Maester Henrik wrote the history of the Kings Beyond the Wall, and there was supposedly a song of how Gendel and Gorn, which are kings beyond the wall, basically settled a dispute between children of the forest and giants over a cave. And I believe that is the cave. So when it comes to the wolf's den and you not being allowed in, those privileges can have repercussions, let's say, right? Like if they were there to settle a dispute, but then eventually the Kings Beyond the Wall took that cave, then clearly there is laws that could be or policies that can be built upon that can better humanity. Also, for the footprints at the end, I thought that was very prevalent to Coldhands and how he rides the elk, and then how the others don't leave footprints, and then that also matches the Wanderer and how you have like people like or lore or mythological figures like Bigfoot who don't leave footprints, right? And then also the hierarchy of the food chain with the panther and the jackal and all that stuff. Yeah, and that's it.
Those are all such great points. I know I saw so much about Varamir Sitskins chapter, and it just related. And then we see One Eye, one of his wolves, and Summer we see the elk, I think, take down, or the pack take down the shadow bear, the snow bear. So I think that was Varamir's too. And there's a little bit of talk about the wargs, when Summer looks at One Eye, he knows that he's a warg, and he says warg, and then they fight. So I thought that was really interesting that he could still sense that animal had been warged. And what I thought was really wild about that part was when he actually got he bit One Eye's leg. He felt, it said it was where is it? Sorry. It said that it was slick with hoarfrost on matted fur. The matted fur of One Eye was slick with hoarfrost when Summer bit him on the leg. And there's so much talk of, being slick with hoarfrost or encased in ice, or ice being on or inside of fur. Like in Winterfell, when they found the Direwolves, it specifically said that the ice was inside the fur, that it was corrupted with ice, and that now we've got a few mentions of ice, but never corrupted by ice or with any hoarfrost. And it's also the only time, really, I think, besides it's really when you just hear hoarfrost so much. It's in Hodor's beard most of the time, which is interesting. And snow is up to his knees, which is also interesting. It kind of is a little bit of foreshadowing, I think, that he'll be a white, kind of shambling with those parts maybe missing later. I mean, it's a horrible thought, but I thought the fight between the two wolves was really interesting, and that the female had a boot with a leg in it, and that all the people that they came across were all Night's Watchmen in black. Bran kept saying, "Oh, they're in black, they're in black." And I also thought it was interesting that Bran could step out of Summer for a minute and disengage and say, "That's a Night's Watch brother," before he went, and then the wolf sense would take over and he'd go eat it. But he would separate for a second and say, "Ooh, black." And I thought that was wild, that he was getting that good, that he could sense and step out for a minute. Do you have anything to say? Or do you want...
Yeah, I have something to say on that. Sorry about that, Ashley. We were talking about that the other day, all of us, and we were wondering if they were Night's Watchmen, who were they? Well, Stefi, she's got her opinion of it, and if that's the case, and Stefi, I'll let you say who it is, and then after you do, what your opinion is. Who was it that they that the Coldhands killed? And then I'll let them say what I think.
Okay, so I looked into it, and it was a mixture of the books and the show, and that's how I got confused at first, because I instantly thought the person without a hand was Benjen, due to the party he left with 6 people, and 7 was himself. Okay, so then you had 2 of them went, that would make 5. And the group that they stumbled across, or Bran and Bearmeal stumbled across, was 5 people. Now, there's only 3 people that are without hands in the books. 2 of them are Night's Watchmen. One of them is dead, which is the one that Ghost brings, and it's not Benjen. But the show portrayed it as being Benjen. So this is where my confusion came in. And I'm wondering if the black iron sword that he has is something more, and maybe he had to sacrifice it. But if not, then I could fully say that it was one of the people that took over Craster's Keep, which is, I believe, Olo Lockhand, or whatever his name is. Yeah, so it was the show and the books merging together, which led me to believe that, because the Dance of Dragons, right, came out like many seasons after, right? So yeah, that was my confusion part.
Well, you had me thinking it was Benjen, and then I kept thinking, oh my God, that's terrible. If it's Benjen, then Bran has eaten part of his uncle at some point during this whole thing, and I kept thinking, oh, that's just terrible. It can't be Benjen, But I can see that maybe it was some of the people that may have escaped the wrath of Jon's wrath that were at Craster's, but. They were trying their best to make sure that none of them escaped. So, still don't know. I just hope and pray it wasn't Benjen. That would be terrible.
It's the fact that he chooses the biggest person, which you would in turn think is a Stark, because throughout this whole entire thing, like especially the end, where he's going through those prophecies, he literally says big, stern men in fur. Like, it's like it makes a point to say that, and then you're talking about his eyes were gouged out, his hand was cut off, right? Then the black sword is in the other hand. Like, especially with the way the Night's Watch is right now, they don't really have a blacksmith to make the weapons anymore, since Don Illinois is dead, right? So yeah,
right. And also with one arm, strange. It's a lot of mentions of one eyes and one arms too. Just I noticed. And yeah, that's I remember when I read it going, oh my God, it's Benjen, he's eating Benjen. Oh my God. But it comes really quickly that he had one hand, you know. But then when you reread it over and over, it's like, oh, it's really clear, but it's in the middle of two really important sentences. So it's hard, it's easy to miss. I think I wrote it down actually, that he said, this really got me actually. This is when, oh, maybe it is when he's eating him, but the quote is, actually, this is when Bran's taken over the pack, so I don't know if I actually wrote that down, but I thought I did. Just give me 1 second while I look. Yeah, so here's what I had written down, which was, I thought was really interesting, because there's so many mentions of the moon here too. He smelled a wolf, a pack. They smelled him too. The female was chewing on a boot with a leg in it. A nest of entrails coiled through a bush, entangled in the branches, steam rising, an open belly rich with the smells of blood from blood and meat. Again, staring sightlessly up at a head, staring sightlessly up at a horned moon, cheeks ripped and torn down to bloody bone, pits for eyes, neck ending in a ragged stump, frozen blood, glistening red and black. Men, the stink of them filled the world. I thought that just hit me like a ton of bricks. Men, the stink of them filled the world. It's the blood again and the killing of all the men. It's just, it's almost as if, you know, the only people that are north of the wall are Night's Watch or wildlings. Well, they're coming across who are whites are strangely Night's Watchmen. So that's just, that part really kind of interested me. Like, why are the only people he's seeing in black? Glistening red and black was so telling. That was a little, you know, a pool of frozen blood, glistening red and black. It's just, it's the red and the blacks kind of from Revolution time, and also the Night's Watch and the red of the Targaryens, maybe Jon. But and the head with the neck ending in a ragged stump, it's all very weirwood-like, entrails and branches, smells of blood and meat. That whole part just had so much in it. And the black iron sword, yeah, that really made me wonder what it was.
Okay, I'll jump in. Okay, when you bring up Varamir and the abominations, I say, if you can say, it happens a lot in this book. But when you bring in the sense of that poem that you read, for me, the lines become a little less blurred, right? It's more like it's not a tightrope, but more of a sidewalk you can walk. So you can go one way or the other way and still be on the sidewalk, but there is that fine line. But it comes to surviving. Like, I kept writing this down, even in my notes previously. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, why would people not want Bran to go into Hodor? Is it that big of an abomination? Like, if I could give a paraplegic person the ability to walk whenever they please, I'd fucking do it. You know what I mean? Like, is there that line in there? Or, like, to me, it's very good for Hodor to do that, because he could have been Thistle and he could have bit off his tongue and he could have caused all this shit and said, no, get the hell out, but he didn't. Which meant to Hodor it was good, and to Bran, like he says, I'll give you back your body, always. So, yeah. Also, on top of the hoarfrost, there's a lot of times where there's hoarfrost on trees, and they mention Bran describes them as giants after that, which is weird. And then when I looked into it more, I came across the Boneway, or the boneless, like, you know what I'm talking about in ET, where they have the maybe you want to jump in, Ashley. Because I know you clear it up.
The Giant's Causeway. I was trying to write it. I couldn't go fast enough. Giant's Causeway?
Yeah, that's it. So when I looked at that, there was also great stone giants there. And that ties into the Lion of Night, which ties into the Night's Queen, and so on and so forth. And that's what I kind of got from the Hoarfrost, which could lead to the Horn of Jormungand and all of that goodness. And yeah,
I like that. That's cool. You know, I wonder too sometimes about how Hodor and Bran, him being skin changed by Bran. It's not how Hodor whimpers and goes inside into a special place, you know, and it seems like it's kind of sad, but if he's just kind of letting Bran do it, and it's not, it's just something he doesn't do, but he's not, like you said, he's not tearing his face apart, and he's not biting his tongue off, so he's not flipping out like that. He's not pain or anything of the kind. And Bran is really sweet. He does always say, I'll give it back, don't worry. It's kind of funny because he's in Hodor a lot of the time exploring, and I think, you know, it would also be kind of sad if Bran was sitting up there not exploring with the rest of them. And that, you're right, I would do the same thing if somebody was, you know, if there was for a minute and go walk around, yeah. So yeah, and the Giant's Causeway came to my mind too, and I didn't write it down. So it's interesting that you said that, because I'm glad you did, because I thought of it too, and I don't even remember why. I just thought of it a lot. Borders and boundaries and how different these lands are.
I had something I was going to talk about on the ravens and the raven lore, if you don't mind. And it's in our society history and lore, our own history and lore, in the European cultures, they saw ravens as evil in disguise, evil in the flesh. In France, people believe ravens were the souls of wicked priests and crows were wicked nuns. In Germany, ravens were the incarnation of damned souls, or sometimes Satan himself. In Sweden, ravens that croaked at night were thought to be the souls of murdered people who didn't have a proper Christian burial. In Denmark, people believed that night ravens were exorcised spirits, and you'd better not look up at them in case there was a hole in the bird's wings, because you might look through the hole and be turned into a raven also. Cultures from Tibet to Greece have seen the raven as the messenger from the gods. The Celtic goddesses of warfare often took the form of ravens. Hugin, which is thought, and Munin, which is memory. And they flew around the world every day and reported back to Odin every night. The Chinese said ravens caused bad weather in the forest to warn people that the gods were going to pass by. Native American tribes worship the raven as a deity in and of itself, and it's described as a sly trickster, and it was involved in the creation of Earth. So there's many things that can be said about ravens and raven lore, and I think that George R.R. Martin has pretty much used everything he there is to say about ravens and raven lore in these books, especially in the Bran chapters.
The ravens are just everywhere in these chapters. And I love that you said that, Nan, because I've done so much research on ravens too, and actually am wearing a necklace right now. Really interestingly enough, it has the hand of Allah is the hand to ward off evil. And then there's a raven, and underneath it is the sign of water, the sign of Aquarius. I thought that was really interesting. I had to buy it because I just thought, wow, this is all the stuff I've been researching, and it's all these beautiful Celtic kind of stuff. And you know, I also see him writing a little bit about Poe there too. There's always the Raven by Poe running through all of this. And, you know, the fact that the Ravens left when was it that they left? I think it was when, part was actually when the murder came to land, when the wind started howling, when, you know, they were talking about Coldhands, whether he was dead or what he was, and asking him, you know, why are your hands black? What are you? And Bran almost retched. He almost threw up when he realized Coldhands was dead. And I thought that was wild. He really has a big reaction to the things around him that he's heard about from old Nan. They scare him, and I don't blame him. The thing that's so interesting about this part with the ravens is that what he said he almost, the bile came up in his throat when he realized Coldhands was truly dead. And he said, the monsters can't, this is what old Nan had said, the monsters cannot pass so long as the wall stands and the men of the Night's Watch stay true. And Coldhands said, when they asked who the three-eyed crow or the last green seer was, and he said, a friend, dreamer, wizard, call him what you will, the last green seer. The end of the long hall bangs open, and the night wind comes howling into the black and bleak night, it says. Bran says, there's a monster. And that's when Coldhands says, I'm your monster, Brandon Stark. And all the ravens start screaming, yours, yours, yours. And I just, that was such a cool, it was just such a cool little, almost a little bit of like grim fairy tales kind of feel in there. It was so cool. And then we get Mira saying anyone can put on a black cloak, anyone. So is he really a man of the Night's Watch? Is he really who he says he is? Questions about who Coldhands is and why he won't show his face, and it's just really interesting to me that Night's Watch brothers. But maybe he knew from the ravens that they were the mutineers from Craster's, and so he thought that they needed to be brought to justice. That was the only thing that made me ravens definitely into Coldhands. It made me realize maybe he's seen just as much as maybe Bloodraven.
I would think that maybe Bloodraven or the crows whispered into his ears who they were, Ashley.
Right.
Because those ravens are always whispering in his ears. And as far as the Night's Watch, I got that part down as well. But I also wrote that the Night's Watch has not been true. They've had the last two Lord Commanders were murdered. and then there's been mutiny, betrayal, and because they forgot about the long night and have no fear of its return. Fear it. They don't expect it to come again. And we know, and a lot of the Night's Watch knows what's out there. And what do? They revolt, like at Craster's Keep. You know, those guys, they know what's out there. They know it's a battle for mankind, for humankind. And they couldn't pull their britches up long enough to fight with them, instead of trying to just hide out there at Craster's and live off of what god? The old gods? Not if they killed Craster. Them old gods ain't gonna like them folks too good. So yeah, they're not true. The Night's Watch is still not true.
Yeah, the Night's Watch hasn't been true for a while, it seems. It's like, it's almost as if nearly every ranging party and ends up north of the wall as white. It's so many of them across. It's surprising how many of them. So it's, you know, this is what old Nan said. They cannot pass as long as the wall stands, and the men of the Night's Watch stay true. So go to sleep, my little Brandon. There are no monsters here. It's almost like she's saying there's no monsters at Winterfell because it's safe. But you go outside of here or north of the wall and there's monsters. That kind of struck me. There are no monsters here. And thinks, you know, now that Coldhands says, I'm your monster, he says, man, but a monster taking us to the other monsters to be devoured. What if he is? I mean, I don't really think he is, but there's always that nagging feeling that you never know. There is a lot in this in these chapters that does say to me that Bloodraven is doing this for the realm. Cemented it. Almost, not quite, but almost. That this is Bloodraven's, and that he's showing Bran a lot of things in the darkness, because you can't have light without dark, just like Melisandre always says. Deal, you know, you can't have shadows, you can't have light without dark. I thought that the other part that was interesting about the three-eyed crow is that Mira and Jojen don't know who he is at all. Ran on this huge journey north beyond the wall, and they don't even know who the three-eyed crow is. So it surprises me that they wouldn't know why he couldn't meet him at the wall, or why they have to keep going to get to him. That really kind of wild. Does anybody want to jump in, or should I keep going? I can.
I'll jump in. Okay. So when it comes to the moon, I'm jumping way back because I kind of jumped out for a second. Okay, so the moon, first of all. Okay, I noticed when Bran said the crescent moon that was in a shape of like a blade, or the sickle that we see later on in A Dance with Dragons. This is Theon chapter 4. I think it's named something else, but I just name it Theon because that's who it is. A crescent moon was floating in a dark sky, half obscured by mist, like an eye peering through a veil of silk. Now, this is when Theon is watching, or all the lords are present for Jane Poole and Ramsay's wedding. So I found that very interesting. And then from there, it develops. Like, but I'll let Nan talk about that later on. As for who Coldhands is, actually, when I was thinking about it, and him hiding himself, you could obviously say his black eyes are from death and the lack of, like, the more exposure your eye gets, you have these like little black, it's almost like a pooling, like your iris of your eye ends up to pool and expand because contaminants are affecting it and the moisture is not clearing it away. So that could be from that. However, when you go back, you're talking about Stony Donish men also have the black eyes. Then you could go to the Danes and how that Nymeria came, when Nymeria fought all those petty kings in that area, like the king of the Torrentine was Vorian Dane. I'm butchering that name. Vorian Dane. Basically, she sent him to the wall along with 6 others. So it could be that person. But then I was like, but Jon also has these traits too. Tyrion has these traits. Bran even has the black eyes. So you're talking about, if it's a bastard related thing, then you could go into that. And the lesser born, which could have been one of Brynden River's friends, right? A part of the Raven's Teeth. You could go that route. But when I came down to it, the only description that I found to be the most accurate was thin and gaunt. There's only basically one person that I know throughout the whole thing that it makes sense for, and that would be Theon Stark, who is the Hungry Wolf, and he was given that nickname due to him being so thin and exactly that depiction. And then when you look back throughout A Dance with Dragons in the Bran chapters, he says, anyone can wear a black coat. And you're like, okay, so this person is clearly not a person of the Night's Watch. On top of that, he's not able to open the gate if he says his vows. If he's technically not dead, which Coldhands is technically rotting, he's in an in-between stage, right? He's in like limbo almost. So I could understand why he wouldn't himself be able to open the gate, because would be a king. He wouldn't be someone else. On top of that, Theon Stark also helped them to defeat a king beyond the wall on top of that. So, and then you have the correlation where the gray eyes, which Jon has, and then from the Stark like line, it could be black. So definitely something to look into. But yeah, that's who I believe Coldhands might be when it comes down to it. All the descriptions.
God, that's so interesting, Stefi. I love that because it makes sense. You know, it makes a lot of sense because of who the next Theon is, you know, Theon Greyjoy, that he's practically Gollum at some points here. I mean, he wants to be a Stark, you know, and that gray eyes really is a Stark trait. It's a Stark everything. Gray, always with the Starks. So, and on their, it could be. I mean, I started to wonder if it was somebody who knew Bloodraven, because when they said anybody could put on a black cloak, I thought, oh my God, did Bloodraven want to go to the wall? Did he want to get up there so he could get to the tree? Obviously, I know he knew something was there. I don't know that he to the wall for that reason. He could have gone there anyway. But you think a little bit about Bloodraven actually taking all of his men, going to the wall and doing what he's doing.
Yeah,
you know, anyone could wear a black cloak.
I always thought it was one of the Raven's teeth for some reason. I always just thought it was the Raven, one of her Bloodraven's old buddies from the Raven's teeth. And I didn't think about him, you know, being in the between states. It seems like that's pretty much close to dead why he couldn't open the door. But if he's not quite dead, but he's not quite alive, then it seems like he still wouldn't be able to open the door. But what came to me was the fact that they started out for Castle Black. They wound up going to the Knight's Fort, and Sam and Gilly wound up coming to the Knight's Fort from the opposite side, and everything they needed for their trip was set out in advance. You had the Gilly and Sam meeting them, and having Gilly and Sam there able to open the door to let them pass. And then you have so many things that have just lined up that way. Another thing that I found interesting, and this is jumping forward a little bit, I just want to get this in before I forget it, and it's when they were asking them who the three-eyed crow raven was, and they said he's a friend, a dreamer, a wizard, and call him what you will, the last green seer. And then that's when they say he's your monster. But when they get onto the village, past the village on the frozen ice, then we see that they're getting closer to the cave itself. And it's like, they could smell the children. Or they could smell them. And then Bran asked, is this the only way in? And, because it's a cave that's about halfway up the mountain, up a hill, and it's just like a fold in the rock is all they see. And what I found really interesting was the answer, and to me, after seeing season 6, it just rather foreshadowed it in a way I missed it on the first read, was it says that the back door is 3 leagues north down a sinkhole. So how, if they're going to have to leave the back door, how is Hodor going to hold the door and climb Bran up the sinkhole too? So that's just a little bit of foreshadowing I did find in the Bran chapters for the Hold the Door episode.
I like that. I was actually really struck by the cave when they went in. Because I actually sent you guys a video about the New Grange tomb, and they're called passage tombs they date back to the Ice Age. I think is like 5,000 years old. And what they are is so interesting. And I think this has a lot to do with Ned and the cairns he built at the Tower of Joy. They really, what Newgrange is it's a tomb of kings. And the king that it holds his name is Dagda. He's the king of the Tuatha De Danann, the people who are very similar to the children of the forest. So that's his tomb. And the way you get into the tomb is a labyrinth, and describe it is perfectly like a labyrinth. Leaf has the torch, and they can see her going around her, and then they see the torch again, so they know to go right, they know to go left. So they're obviously going around some kind of a maze, which is really interesting to me, because that was spiritual ascension and things like that. Freemason walkabouts, stuff like that. And there's the maze makers and mazes under House Hightower in Old Town and under Dragonstone, I believe, or Storm's End. I think it's Dragonstone. So just hit me hard. And then once you get into these passage tombs, they're all such a way that they capture the winter solstice or the summer solstice. The older ones actually capture the summer solstice, which is really interesting. The ones that are about 6,000 years old capture the summer solstice. And the one at Newgrange captures the winter solstice, and it holds a king, and it's 1,000 years newer, 5,000 years old still, but it's newer than the others. So that tells me that they went from a lunar to solar deity worship to a female deity, a triple deity, most likely. That's what they worshipped in Ireland at that time. Once time went on, they started to worship the solar deities, and that's when you start building things to track the winter solstice, because now the fear is there that the sun's died and that it's not going to come back. And if you can't see winter solstice and see the days getting longer, even Bran mentions it in this chapter that the days are getting shorter and shorter in this weather. It just hit me so hard that this is a tomb of a king. Really, it's set up like that, and Lord Bloodraven's sitting there in this grand throne with the tree growing through him in this gorgeous way. But it's really one of those exact kind of things. And I wonder if it, it obviously has an opening that Bran can look out and see the moon, because in all these chapters, I think it's the beginning of almost every chapter except for one, the moon was dark tonight, the moon was a crescent tonight, the moon was full tonight. And so he's tracking the cycles of the moon to keep track of probably when winter will come, when winter will really hit, or if spring is going to come, just like they used to do. So that part really blew my mind. I don't know if it, and by the way, there's those spirals all over those tombs, Strange tomb. So it does have something to do with seasons changing. Actually, the king, just really quick, that's buried in that tomb, he had a harp that controlled the seasons. So that's interesting tie-in too. These passage tombs usually have passageways under them that can lead you out somewhere else. So, but most of them just end in a big, with the bones of a king and a black pool. Always a black pool. There, and let someone else talk.
Okay, I'll go. Okay, I did catch on to the Black River. I do find it weird that they did catch like a white fish. I just found that really weird, and maybe that's a little bit of a Lady Stoneheart reference, but I wouldn't be so sure. But yeah, and how Hodor basically pulls Jojen up instead of so it's going to be the reverse of Hodor basically making a levy and pulling Bran, or pushing Bran down, like letting him go down. The black pool, as for that, I did notice that Theon notices it, and when Bran starts going to him, and he says that the pool is actually starting to freeze up despite it being still so warm. So maybe that gives more proof that it is somehow attached to the north, because you're talking about the northern point would be more cold than a southern point. So if that's the same river going down, then, and it's a rushing river, then obviously those like icicles and the surface would keep going and pulling up to the surface of that black pool. As for the door, I have no idea what door Hodor is going to hold. I don't think it's going to be in the cave. For some reason, I think it's too soon for Hodor to go. I think it has to be some other time. Yeah, you also, Nan. As for the harp and the singing in the seasons, I do find it really suspicious when you brought that up, and how when Rhaegar did entice Lyanna at the tourney of Harrenhal, he was on his harp during the false spring. So again, that kind of wiggles its way in there. And then how the children of the forest are said to sing such beautiful, sweet music, and Bran describes it as pure as winter. again, showing the solstices and the changing of the seasons and everything. Yeah.
Oh, what a cool thing to notice. Yeah, it's so cool the way, I just love the way he talks about the children and the way the children are, and the way it's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking that watching their long dwindling, and it's really sad. And everywhere you look, it's just how man has just destroyed everything. It's just how what we do. We destroy things. We take the resources. We destroy the rivers and streams. You know, the thing about those white fish, that really gets me too every time I see the white fish, because Elia Martell, the newly Elia Martell, the daughter of the cousin of Ariane Martell, when they're in Ariane's second chapter, I think it is, they're in a cave and she catches a whitefish in that cave. So that's down there in Dorne. And they're catching whitefish down there too. So, oh my gosh. Wow. I just saw something that just kind of tripped me out.
Me too.
I wonder if the people that are giving us dislikes want to say why they are.
Well, thanks for the views anyway. I'd like to step back a little bit and go with and look at Hodor in their trip to the cave itself, in the fight up to the cave. And then Hodor gets in trouble. And Bran hears Hodor whimpering, and he immediately jumps into Hodor, and he all of a sudden, the way George describes him is that he was 7 feet of fury with old iron in his hands. And I think that's just a very good way of putting it. He had old iron in his hands, and he was 7 feet of fury. And it's like a total different transformation. The Bran, the Hodor with and without Bran. And Hodor in the early days, he knew what he was doing. He had a good mind and everything. So, you know, it makes you wonder about his and Bran's relationship, because what happened to Hodor happened before Bran was even born, technically, in one sense. So it's kind of a mind-boggling thing there. That's all I got to say for now.
I agree with you there, Nan. Stefi, do you want to go, or do you want me to? I'll go. Yeah, I think that's interesting too. And then we've got the vision of the woman and the woman coming out of the black pool. Speaking of the black pools, so, and you know, it's easy to wonder if the woman kissing a tall man is Old Nan. And it's easy to wonder also who the woman is coming out of the pool and begging for vengeance at the heart tree. So that really kind of sent me down the rabbit hole, of course. And I started to wonder if that might not be totally went out of my head. Sorry, I'm not focusing because I'm thinking about something else. But I'll just go on to talk about this part right here that I really found interesting, is that the elk that Coldhands rides stays mostly beneath the trees until he's crossing the ice. They make a point of mentioning that. And the fact that the trees weren't as infallible a guide as one might have hoped, which is interesting, that the trees even start to seem like they're betraying them, their well, it's really cold, while they're really having a hard time getting through the snow. And I thought that might have been a little bit of foreshadowing, maybe, of what's to come in the Winds of Winter, because the quote is that it says that wind that it's so cold and the wind is blowing so hard that it gets into their eyes and blinds them, and that they can't see, it's hard to breathe, and that it's nearly impossible to get through. So I can just see a ton of people going through this. And here's the quote. Even the trees were not as infallible a guide as they might have hoped, for there were wooded islands in the lake and wide areas ashore where no trees grew. So that's almost like a beach or something, a clearing maybe that someone cut down, that someone salted. I don't know. The elk stayed mostly beneath the trees, but he'd cross ice. Shadows began to steal between the trees, the long fingers of the dusk. Dusk came early this far north. Each day seemed shorter than the last, and when the days were cold, the nights were bitter cruel. And interestingly enough, well, it says, out there, the wind was stronger, a cold north wind that howled across the lake. Howled across the lake and knifed through the layers of their wool and leather and set them all to shivering. When it blew into their faces, it would drive the snow into their eyes and leave them as good as blind. That's just something that we're going to see with people walking through the snow trying to get somewhere safe. That was a big foreshadowing. And then, interestingly enough, in the middle of that, it says, Jojam's lips were blue, Mira's cheeks were dark red, Bran's own face had gone numb, Hodor's beard ice. And I thought that might, I said before, be a little foreshadowing of him becoming a white, but it's interesting that Jojen's lips were blue and Mira's cheeks were dark red, and that Bran's face had gone numb. So the colors are there again.
Stefi, you got something
on? Yeah, okay, so when it came to Bran's vision, okay, so when that started, obviously there's younger Ned, and he's coming home, and I basically have the same sentiment as Ashley. It has to do with Ned wishing that Rob and John would grow up as brothers, making it seem that they're cousins or half brothers, but it's doubtful that it's half brothers, because if you wanted them to be brothers already, if they're half brothers, they are. But okay. As for Lyanna playing with a long-haired brother, now he does resemble Arya to Lyanna, so that's an obvious clue. But people think that this is Benjen, and for me, it just doesn't seem like it. It's the saying. It says, "You be quiet, stupid." And when you go to the Night of the Laughing Tree story and the Tourney of Harrenhal, and what Ned is referred to is not the pup, but is referred to as the quiet wolf. So for me, it would be Ned and Lyanna playing, which means Ned hasn't hit his growth spurt yet. As for a woman heavy with child emerged naked and dripping from the black pool and everything like that and wanted vengeance. Now, I understand that a lot of people feel like this would have to do with the She-Wolves of Winterfell and the new Dunk and Egg novel. For me, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it. It seems like if you were going to wish for your child to to give you vengeance and to avenge you in some kind of form, it would seem like you're putting all your efforts into one child. And if the tree is itself shrinking as time goes on and not growing, then for me it would have to be Marna Locke, which gave birth to Rickard Stark, and that's how that line formed of the Starks itself. So for me, it's too early to jump that far back. As for the next one and the fourth one of the brown-haired girl thunder as a spear who stood on the tips of the toes to kiss the lips of a young knight. Now I believe that would be the Duncan Ale, like the Duncan Eggtail, and how that is going down. Is the woman Old Nan though? I still doubt it, because if you're talking about, she came during the time as a wet nurse for Brandon, who died as a child. For me, that was the very first kid. She would not be slender anymore if you think about it. Like, she's giving birth to daughters, to sons, like her breasts would be massive. You wouldn't be called slender. That would be someone who is more like Arya, who is also known as being slender, which is again a Stark trait, right? Same with Sansa. Sansa is known to be very slender like a sword. This is the whole point of Needle too, right? Slender. So for me, if it is Dunk kissing someone, it's going to be a Stark. It has to be in my books. But if it is someone related to Old Nan, then it's probably a daughter of hers. But her daughters moved away and they died. So I don't really feel like, if Dunk were to have a living heir, which probably goes to Brienne or goes to Hodor, it has to tie into those areas. And for me, Old Nan doesn't have the hierarchy or the nobility that other nobles would have to entice Dunk to have sex with. So, and then the fifth one is definitely the three slices, again, were probably from, I'd probably say when, I think it's Brandon. Hold on, let me look here. Yeah, Brandon Snow, which is Torrhen Stark's bastard brother, were making the arrows for the three dragons, Aegon's three dragons. And the fifth one, I talked about this in the previous episode, which was Edric Snowbeard Stark. But then again, you could also go with Theon Stark as well, because of Coldhands, and that referring to Theon Stark in my theory as well. Then it could be him due to his beard as well, being very slender and being skinny, and then him sacrificing a brother to the werewood. That's it.
Because
I like.
Go ahead, Nan.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Ashley.
please go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah, no, please go ahead. Thanks.
I did some of my homework, some things I looked at that. Thank you, Ashley, for the homework, the references, and I looked into the lost world of human hybrids. About 10,900 years ago in our own timeline, a comet came and impacted the Earth, and there was a global ash cloud that came and it blotted out the sun for a number of years, and it caused a mini ice age. It was like 1,300 years it lasted, and it was known as the Young Andreas. And it caused the cultures and people to migrate to new territories, and it caused them to move south. The temperatures kept dropping. The water, there was a drought because the water was frozen, so there was no flowing, running water. And one group of them that I found very interesting were the Swindarians. And according to this fellow that did this, Andrew Collins, they believe that the Swindarians are a mix of the Neanderthals and the Homo sapiens. The Neanderthals have a larger occipital area or a larger cerebellum. Their larger brains house a larger cerebellum, and their cerebellum is where their dreams and spiritual things and aspects come from in that respect. And also the pineal gland, and they talked about that in regard to genesis, hallucinogens. Anyway, those things that make you see things that ain't there, like the happy mushrooms and stuff. Anyway, that was always been associated with shamanism. And it brought me to mind of the weirwood paste and wondering if the weirwood paste may have some psychogenic, hallucinogenic properties as well. But some of the things about the Swindarians I'd like to go over is that they were reindeer hunters, they were wolf shamans, distance traders in exotic flint and obsidian, they were open cast miners, they were stone tool specialists with a sophisticated tool-making technology. One of the tools and techniques was an advanced pressure flaking. And then they moved down south, and the area was in above the Caucasus Mountains, and it covered from Poland to Middle Russia, and those began to migrate. And as they moved south, they found that the people thousands of years later had what they called cataclysm phobia. They were afraid of every time a comet came down, every time a star fell, every time there was any kind of signs in the sky, they thought it was going to be a catastrophe. The Swindarians combated that by making their buildings that were their cult buildings, their priests, their temples, they supersized them. And this seemed to help the people feel better. But I found that it was very strange in that all of these things, the obsidian work, all of these seems like things that George R. Martin has actually written about. So I thought that that was interesting. And in some respect, it made me think that maybe the first men were some type of Neanderthal type person.
I'll jump in there because that makes sense. With a lot of the aspects of the book, when it came to men would not be sad, men would be wroth, men would hate and swear a bloody vengeance. The singers sing sad songs where men would fight and kill. That's where I was going when I kept hearing you talk about it, of this evolution. Because if it does have to do with evolution, technically they're not killing off the children of the forest. The children of the forest are within their blood, which is something that Brendan Rivers brings up to Bran. Your blood makes you a green seer. This pace is just awakening it, right? So it goes back to that of evolution, of the Homo sapiens and the merging of lines, whether it's like the French and the English and the War of the Roses and this line of Scotland and all these aspects being put together into one singular place. You can't say that you're ever going to kill something off, because as long as you have that blood, that's all that will remain. You will never die. Your spirit will live on through that. This also brings up the sentiment Bran has with Jojen and being brave, and you can only be brave when you're afraid, when you're facing that enemy. So again, it has the sentiment of even Coldhands has this also, that you're most calm when you realize you are gonna die, that there is no more pressure for you to live, right? It's like almost this peace feeling, calm in the face of death, of a kind of peace at the moment of one's extinction, right? It's knowing that one aspect is going to keep you living throughout these generations. And maybe that's more philosophical by point, right? Of this like line forever continuing, that you're never really dead, of whether it's religious or otherwise. Like, so I get what Nan is saying. That was beautiful.
Thank you, hon.
Yes, it was. I agree. And I think that you know, I really do think that that ties into the spirals that they're making and the on the Massey sigil. And I did a lot of research into the Masseys and why that would be their sigil. That changed allegiances quite a few times. They almost just kind of seamlessly did it instead of the way that most people are seen, just kind of going and bending the knee to the winner. The Masseys have done it in a kind of artful way. So it's almost like they understand the need to bring people together and to have more of a sense of oneness, because Justin Massey also has that way about him where he's kind to everyone. He's just so gallant in such a kind of funny way with Asha, and she's going, oh my God, this is my knight. But he's so sweet too. It's like there's something with those spirals that has to do with life, death, rebirth, you know, and what you were talking about, Nan. It ties, I think, into that and why they're making those everywhere. It's almost like it's the sign of a green seer, because I'm sure you can see how the world could come together, how the three colors, the earth, if you want to look at it as fire and earth, or if you want to look at it as Targaryen, Starks, and children of the forest, either way, they all have to come together in order to on and save their world. So, and it does seem like Jojen is kind of, you know, not afraid to die at all. He even talks about how time and this was his purpose and this is what he was supposed to do. And I thought that was so beautiful. The whole Jojen part, everything with Jojen, just almost want to cry sometimes. He's so dear and talks a lot about why he's the little grandfather and why he's so wise. Yeah, I wrote down Jojen's dying, but keeps promising Mira that he's not. And me that he said crushed acorns would make his stomach hurt worse. I thought that's weird for if you're a green seer or if you have green dreams. Why would the acorn paste make you sick to your stomach, I wonder? Someone who just has green dreams should eat. Maybe it is hallucinogenic in some way. And they're surrounded by mushrooms too in that cave. That there's a little bit of maybe astral projection with Blood Raven, which I can see. You know, it's warging is really kind of, or skin changing does have a bit of astral projection to it. Astral projection has to be something that happens when you get to a certain stage in your spiritual life. So just that, and the fact that Bran's eyes are blue, and they go over this again in this chapter, that his eyes are blue and that green seers have yellow, red, or green eyes. And so, but then I realized Summer has yellow eyes. So I wonder if that's how Bran is able to be a green seer. Or that's why because no one says, you know, oh, it's odd that you have blue eyes while he's in the green seer. Green seers are. Why no one would say, oh, you're really not a green seer or anything like that. He's there waiting for him. So maybe the last green seer has a different color eyes or has to be a warg. I don't know. I just thought it was really interesting that Summer's eyes are yellow and Bran's are not a green seer color. And that's really.
I'll jump in that.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so I had the same questions that you did. I found it when you bring in Faramir, and almost everything that he ever says to Jon, and then you bring on the prologue to A Dance with Dragons, and then you do this chapter. Find it very, very weird that on top of also Preston Jacobs' video of the genes and the Targaryen genes and the dragon riding genes and the birthing genes of dragons itself, I wonder if not all the Starks were wargs, if their brothers and sisters were, and if the queen and king were also like, let's say if Jon was ruling but he couldn't warg, and Sansa was able to warg, she would go into as direwolf, and that would be king and queen, if you get what I'm saying. I know that's a little weird, but I'm wondering if these direwolves at the feet of these kings in the crypts of Winterfell do have another association with them, and if they're a sibling. As for Bran and the Pace and Jojen, okay, I do find it pretty obvious that there was some kind of blood sacrifice going on. I think that's very prevalent in everything from the moon being a blade to the last green seer dream that Bran has and all that stuff. But it's like Jojen is there within the chapter, and then it's like Mira talks to Bran, and then he's not there, so you assume he's dead. I feel like it might be just a little bit too soon, but I can understand why he would be in the Pace. But I feel like if it was going to be the Pace itself that Leaf gives it a description of it being the werewood bark, it would make sense only for the fact that squirrels do eat bark. They do eat the acorns. They do eat the leaves from trees. And it would make sense that Bran, if he wanted to be a singer or a green seer, would have to do the same things that these children of the forest did. And maybe that's also why the giants gave them that squirrel description, was to show you that. But when it comes to like lore, I did find it a little weird that, have you ever heard the saying that when you eat a watermelon seed, it could grow in your stomach? It's kind of like that. Like, I get that feeling that it could be just that magical and it could be truthful, but I could see how it could definitely go the other way.
Also, I wanted to confirm, though, in the one I did on another one of those I looked up, there was one guy who had gone to the Amazon and had taken of some kind of a plant that DMT in it, and it was the hallucinogenics. It was the stuff, the psychedelic stuff. And anyway, that guy had experienced the same thing in relationship that Bran had experienced. He got the nausea, he threw up and things like that as well. So that also goes along with it being psychedelic stuff. Before I go, one thing I found interesting when he was talking to Bloodraven, and Bloodraven tells him, "I saw your birth and was part of your first dream." Yeah, he's been watching these kids for a long time.
Yeah, that part was really, really cool when he said that he's been watching. He saw Ned's birth and Bran's birth, and he's been watching for that long. It really is interesting. Why? It just, I want to know, like, why he chose. Well, I think there's a little bit in the Law of the Jungle that I read why all this stuff is going on. Like, you had just said, Stefi, that the, something about the blood sacrifice, but also how the squirrels do eat acorns, which is so cool. And the singers called the giants called the singers squirrels. And what I thought was really cool about that too is that in Norse mythology, the Yggdrasil tree, the tree of life, they have squirrels that run up and down the 9, take gossip from the gods in Asgard down to all the way to Helheim, but they gossip all the way through the 9 realms. So they sort of cause chaos. They're like Varys and Littlefinger, where they just go around just causing chaos. And then Mance's spear wives that he takes down to Winterfell, and he's the bard, and he's got his spear wives with him. They actually have the same names as the squirrels in the Yggdrasil tree. The myrtle, or I think it's willow, holly, and something else. So I thought that was kind of cool that they tied in the squirrels there too. That George tied them in to that part. And the part about the blood sacrifice and the king and queen and the switching, I totally got what you meant by that. And I think it almost makes me feel like that might happen, and that might be what stuff about Hodor with that sword and the one that he took from the crypts and the rust that's on it, and the way that rust works, and how just makes me wonder if the stone giants, if these guys aren't just going to get up, and they aren't already almost like a green seer with someone in them, or someone can jump into the body and inhabit it. It's sort of here in this poem, but it's so long, I don't want to make anyone sit here while I find it, but I'll look at it while we're talking and go from there. But I really wanted to say, excuse the paper, I wanted to say that the moon is really interesting, because every time they mention the moon, it's here. The moon was a crescent, thin and sharp as the blade of a knife, like you were saying, Stefi. A pale sun rose and set and rose again. Red leaves whispered in the wind. Dark clouds filled the skies and turned to storms. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Dead men with black hands and bright blue eyes shuffled around a cleft in the hillside, but could not enter. Under the hill, the broken boy sat upon a weirwood throne, listening to whispers in the dark, as ravens walked up and down his arms. You will never walk again, but you will fly. So it's so interesting, because then it also mentions the sun, or the moon, was a black hole in the sky. Wolves howled in the wood, sniffing after dead things in the snowdrifts. A murder of ravens erupted from the hillside, screaming their sharp cries, beating over a white world. A red sun rose and set and rose again, and shades of rose and pink. So it's all this black and red, over and over again, and white. No other colors really in the world up there. It's just stark. Excuse the pun, but it really is. It's stark. He even goes so far as to say that the laying against the snow was such a stark look, with the red of the blood, the black of the cloaks, and the white of the snow, and being so gray and kind of white itself, and there's all these different contrasts between the black and the white. Contrast there. They even call it a bone grinding cold. It's interesting. In these tombs, these passage tombs, just really quick, I have to add this, because in those passage tombs, what they leave in there isn't just the way they leave the remains of the kings, is just crushed up bones. Their bones crushed up. So it's not a body, it's a tomb with a bowl in it that has their crushed up bones in it. So I thought that was a little bit interesting that he called it a bone grinding cold of the lands beyond the wall. Stefi, go ahead.
Okay, so before Bran eats this werewood paste, he sees like a cave full of children of the forest, and just like Brynden Rivers, they're like kind of like mixed in with the werewood and the heart tree. Well, we don't know if it's a heart tree above. We don't know if there's a face above it, but one of the children of the forest opens its mouth like it's gonna say something to Bran, and then it doesn't, right? Because I guess it's too dry or whatever. He's been in the tree for so long that he doesn't remember how to speak, or maybe he's so old that he doesn't know how to speak the Westerosi language, right? So, but that being said, Leaf says something in this that she says that the tree nurtures Brynden Rivers, that his life force is driven from the tree. Now, if the children of the forest are attached to this werewood and feeding Brynden Rivers, maybe if he were to carve it off, maybe he's getting the actual essence of these children of the forest without actually physically going into cannibalism, if you get what I'm saying. Just a weird tinfoil thought.
Actually, I had that one on my list as well, Stefi. As far as them going, that other, that one did open his tree, and what it made me think of is how much of Brynden Rivers is actually there. What is actually left of him? Because the description of him makes it appear that his body is dead, is what it appears to be. And so is it a green seer talking, possibly the one that tried to talk to Bran, or, as far as what he can do, Bloodraven can't talk, as far as I know, to anybody so that they can understand it. He keeps telling them they will not understand you. But when they get to the Theon chapter, he does understand. Theon clearly understood him saying it was Bran. The tree even had Bran's face there. But another thing I wanted to jump back to was the children of the forest that were in the cave. They said there was 70, and that makes there 60 living children of the forest in that cave. So it's far beyond just the 8 or 10 that you see on the show. There's at least 60 of them living under that tree in that cave. And that's about all I had on that part.
Okay, I'll jump in really quickly. They see 60 children of the forest, but he also hears more singing down in certain chasms when they're walking by, and then when they pass over the Black River, also they hear singing. So there is definitely more children of the forest than we assume. It's just they're not there, they're not present. As for being able to talk to the past, now I'm gonna actually quote what who says it? Brynden Rivers says. He says, he had heard a whisper on the wind, a rustling amongst the leaves. You cannot speak to him, try as you might. I know. I have my own ghost, Bran. A brother I loved, a brother I hated, a woman I desired. Through the trees, I see them still, but no word of mine has ever reached them. The past remains the past. We can learn from it, but we cannot change it. He says nothing about the present. Absolutely nothing. Because I was talking to Nan about this earlier on too, how before Bran even reaches the cave with Brynden Rivers, he actually kind of goes with John, and he takes a sapling and it kind of grows and his face comes through and he's like, oh, here's the power, John, and he taps them on the head. So if it's in the present tense, I feel like the thing with Theon makes sense. If it's in the past and Bran is in the future, which he isn't, because I brought that up of the crescent moon, of him aging with it. And I'd also like to say something else also in regards to Theon's chapter involving Bran. Bran also notices that Bran is maturing also during this time. That the werewood face and like on the heart tree, it's starting to grow a little mustache of icicles on it. So Bran is developing, and it's supposedly in the present, because we also see that his hormones are kind of going wild with Mira and loving her and wanting to tell her and to get physical with her, even though he does weird things with Hodor and wants to comfort her. But he is growing. So it points to that it is more or less in the present. It is not in the past. So it makes me believe that the past is the past. It is written. You can't change it in any format. And also when it comes to Bran seeing Ned for the first time, where's that? Leaf says, no, he is gone, boy. Do not seek to call him back from death. Meaning, like for me, when Leaf says that, that means if you do end up doing something, if you do end up calling him, he's going to be something else right now. He's not going to be back then and changing history. He's going to come up right now and be something else. Like, so I feel like that could also lead to possibly a white and maybe seeing the death of something, or maybe how the others are created in some relative format of someone calling them alive, if that makes sense. But yes.
That does make sense, Stefi, and what you said about the other, that makes total sense too. It being in the present and not in the past, and that could be why he's able to be heard and actually seen in the present. Good work.
Yeah, I agree completely. I like that. I agree too. I just wanted to bring something up about the horned moon that the head was looking at. The crescent moon actually in symbolism, it represents the lunar phase in the first quarter, and they call it the sickle moon. Interesting that it's called the sickle moon. I wonder if that's when they would do their sacrifice. I don't know if you already said that, Stefi, maybe when I was gone. But the horned moon is it's mentioned a lot in Shakespeare. Mentioned a lot having to do with the lady of the lake. It also is mentioned with what's her name? It's basically the balance of masculine and feminine. I think it's Venus. It's also a symbol for the god Ceremonious, that is the god of, the green man god is what he is. And so I find that really interesting that the horned moon was mentioned. And when you go back to the horned moon in Celtic mythology, it's all about the green man, who is part of a tree. His face is all leaves. And of him is just a green face with like one of the children of the forest, but with leaves for hair. And he's also, the green men, they also control the seasons. And they live on an island in what was said to be the lake of life, kind of like in the middle of the lake that as ice as the beginning of the world. And then there formed a lake in the middle of it that was kind of, they called an eye. It's a lot like the God's eye. So it's like the green men from there are maybe part of this controlling of the weather, and as well as the harp, as well as all the way up to always winter and this cave that Bloodraven's in. And I think it's also representative of the sun and the moon being in a place where, you know, this time of humanity kind of breaking down and warring and kinslaying and all the things we always talk about, maybe what brings the others, or part of what brings the others is that the people don't remember what their purpose is. They also don't remember how to behave, and they're breaking down society. They're killing each other. They're spreading too much blood. The sun and the moon have to come together at some point, as in they have to come together. And, you know, the moon is blue, usually in symbolism, and the sun is red. So those two have to come together. It's the same thing again, back to the pact and the ice and fire to come together. So I think that's really cool that we see these references all over of the moon.
When
Go ahead, Stefi.
no, you go, man.
I just was I found one passage that Bran thought to be very, very poignant. It's when they're talking about the direwolves will outlast us all, but their time will come to as well that men have made. There is no room for them or us. And it was only later Bran thought men would not be sad. Men would be wroth. Men would hate and swear a bloody vengeance. The singers sing sad songs where men would fight and kill. That says a lot right there. And that's probably, if we had a disaster coming our way of some big proportion, there would be rioting and there would be all kinds of problems in this world, even now.
Yeah, I brought that up with your point earlier. How I believe that there is peace during extinction. That there's some kind of serenity that you get when it is your last moments, and you do realize that, and you do almost feel like forgiving yourself. Like if you've ever seen like a grandparent die, or a parent die, or anything like that, or even a pet die, like you feel sad for like doing something and you want to redeem yourself due to it, right? And then vice versa. So, but when Ashley was bringing this up, and again following this men would be wroth, all I kept thinking of was Pocahontas, and maybe that goes into the law of the jungle, and maybe a little bit of the Raven speech, and maybe even the Wanderer for Beowulf a little bit. But I'm just gonna quote the song that the Willow says to Pocahontas. She says, "You will understand. Listen with your heart. You will understand. Let it break upon you like a wave upon the sand." It's almost like time will work itself out. Like you don't stress about it. Don't worry about it. Just figure it out. I'm a Disney kid. I grew up in the 90s. Okay, maybe that was just me. But yeah, so, and then when you think about the story of Pocahontas, it's about the invasion of men into native land. So, and then the union of both of them, ultimately. So again, it's never truly extinction. There is that piece of your blood that gets transferred on.
It's true. I love the Pocahontas reference. difference, because I do think he uses those things. I really do, and it's so cute too. It fits. How much of this law of the jungle is in all of this, especially that part. You know, the midnight, to be silent and don't wake the woods with your bay, you know, so that your brothers can also have food, and don't frighten the deer from the crop so they can eat. It's like, you know, they just have the wolves are at the top of the food chain in this law. So everybody has to kind of way of the wolves. And, you know, it says, lest your brothers go empty away, you can't let anybody go hungry. And this is it makes me think, you know, you can apply this right to the Starks. This is why a Stark has to be at Winterfell. Lest ye frighten the deer from the crop, and all your brothers go empty away, ye may kill for yourselves and your mates and your cubs as they need, and you can, and for the pleasure of killing, and 7 times never kill a man. So it's like again, are the protectors, and if they're too exposed, like what it's saying in the law of the jungle is that if the lair of the wolf is too plain, then the council sends him a message and he changes his location so that he's not in danger. And you know, kind of, it's also might makes right things again, where if you plunder from his kill from a weaker, devour not all in thy pride. It's all very as pack right is the right of the meanest. It really ties in the Starks with the wildlings again, and just shows how comfortable Bran's falling in his little basket on Hodor's back, and he says the world's spinning, and you know, he's never scared. He's never all the way going, oh my God, what have I done? Why am I up here? I mean, he questions it, but he never fully gets like totally scared that he's doing the wrong thing. And I think that's really cool, that he's just like on an adventure, and whatever happens will happen. But the weight of it starts to hit at the end of these chapters, where you realize that Bran's the only one. He's there. It's like they're telling him he's the only hope they have. And that's just heartbreaking. That whole speech about Leaf and the long dwindling just breaks my heart. It's such a sweet speech. So I'll let somebody else talk for a minute. I've been talking.
Okay, so yeah, I also thought that when it came to the law of the jungle and that narration and everything, that even when Coldhands was killing the elk, there was some sort of like ritual, like some sort of blessing, that it wasn't for pleasure, it was for a means to an end, that there had to be a sacrifice in order to feed everyone else. But I also wonder what part Bran ate in that elk, just because of the whole Dany thing and her eating the heart of the horse, I think it was, and like her being like, this is just gross, like why am I doing this? But it really never specifies what part he's eating, but I wish I knew. As for the environment, I also thought this too. You're talking about bats or skeletons on the ceiling, that the werewood roots look like worms, and it's dark and it's whatever. Everything points to it being scary. But then when you have like Brynden Rivers saying like all these sweet things to him, it doesn't come off as scary. Like he's saying, I've been watching you for like so long. It kind of reminds me of the Christina Perry song or whatever her name is, and I've waited 1,000 years. Like you know what I mean? Like it sounds so romantic and so heartfelt that it's like, you're not bad, dude. Like there's no way. But that's what I got from it too. So.
I had a vision when I was reading of summer, I had a total zombie vision, when he's chewing up the whites, and the hand just won't quit moving until he gets to the marrow, and it's like, oh Lord, this is one of those real zombie moments that you see in TV genres, zombie genres all over, that hand just still moving until he gets into the white. That was kind of neat. But they even made Bran throne, Bran's got his own throne now. And they're putting him in it. And I would have sworn at the end of this book that Bran would have never got out of the tree if it had not been for last season. I mean, I would have thought that he was stuck in that tree forever. Made it appear that way and think. But after watching season 6, and then after seeing that the back door is 3 leagues north, I'm thinking, Lord, he's going to have to come out of that tree. At some point, he's coming out of that tree. I never saw it in the first read before I saw chapter 6. Oh, season 6.
Yeah, I thought the same exact thing, that he was in a tree. But I just never know about the show. I'll just say that really quick. Were you saying something, Steph? Did I interrupt you?
I actually am disagreeing with you guys. I always thought Bran was gonna get out. I always thought it was just like sort of like Jedi training. You're gonna hit the road soon. Just I'm probably gonna die in the process. Just you gotta get going after everything I teach you. Gotta go save the world, right? That's how I always viewed it. If Bran dies, or is stuck in a tree, it's like, how good of a person can you be, or how bad can you be if you're stuck in a tree? There's very little impact that you can have upon the world if you're stuck in a tree. What is he gonna just watch everything? It's no. For me, he had to get out. The river was there. It just made sense with Winterfell, and then you have Gorn's Way. It just was so obvious for me. Maybe it wasn't for everyone else. It's just I didn't see it as scary as everyone else, and maybe that's why. Like I said, I looked at it as a romantic gesture almost. Like it was. I know I'm silly, but that's how I viewed it.
It reminded me of the journey to the center of the earth. It's really frightening at first. And then when you get there, you find out they got goat and cheese, milk, and all barley and all kinds of stuff down there. But one thing that when they were talking about the werewood paste, and they told him, he asked them, would it make him a green seer? And they told him, your blood makes you a green seer. It said, this will help awaken your gifts and wed you to the tree. It's like, who else? And he's thinking to himself, who else would want to wed a broken boy but a tree? So he's actually feels like he's wed to the trees.
Part 2. He's like, I don't know who would marry me but a tree. It's really sweet. I thought it was a little interesting that they mentioned barley so much and barley corn, because I've said something about this before, but George was doing an interview where someone asked him about something about the barley corn and Jon Snow, and he started saying, yeah, I've played with the myth of John Barleycorn from American lore a little bit. And so them bringing up the barley in there so much and eating barley, having barley corn inside there, it's almost like that makes it mean that they're a little bit further advanced in their agriculture, because barley it didn't come around, or at least barley corn didn't come around until a little bit later. So I thought that was interesting to tie into John, just how another barley mention. But I had found a couple things from the sorry, the way that maybe that people could hole up somewhere, like in Storm's End or somewhere that Bran the Builder has built, because these places that he's built they're all round, and they all seem like these towers that were built in Ireland even in the Ice Age times, and they've now been, like House Hightower, they've been built onto, or they were once really tall, and then they fell over the course of earthquakes and stuff like that. But the interesting part of them is that they're all over the place, and if there is a window or a crenellation in them, they face the four directions, or they face somewhere that can catch an equinox or a solstice. So I found this quote in the World of Ice and Fire about the Andals, and thought, I wonder if this is the way maybe that the others will make their way south, or if it has something to do with that. It's a quote about the Andals and the Stormlands from the World of Ice and Fire. It says, it's an error to assert that the Storm Kings turned back the invaders. For all their victories, they had never stemmed the Andal tide. Many an Andal king and warlord ended with his head impaled upon a spike above the gates of Storm's End. Still the Andals kept coming. The reverse is also true. The Andals never truly conquered the line of Durrandon. 7 times they laid siege to Storm's End, or sought to storm its mighty walls, history tells us. Was seen as a gift. The 7th failure was seen as a gift from the gods. After that, no further assaults were made. It's like 7 times you assault, and it's interesting that it's the line of Durrandons and the Storm Kings, because he talks about how the lightning flashed and the thunder rumbled, and he makes a lot of references to the storms, and really ties back to the Storm Kings as far as I see. And then there's a few mentions of ash that ties into the impaled dreamers too, which I know, Nan, we're always interested in, and we're always talking about something here about how Bran and Mira and Bran had named the singers Ash, Leaf, Scales, Black Knife, Snowy Locks, and Coals. And then when I looked up the dreamers impaled on spears, it's from Melisandre's chapter in A Dance with Dragons. The spears were 8 feet long, made of ash. The one on the left had a slight crook, but the other straight, and the top of each was impaled with a severed head. Their beards were full of ice, just like Hodor's through this whole thing. Snow had given them white hoods. That also ties back to the sentinels trees that he sees, and he keeps saying how they're covered in snow, and so they're cloaked in white, or dressed even in white. He says, I think garbed in white. It says, where their eyes had been, only empty sockets remained, black and bloody holes that stared down in silent accusation. So it's like, wow, that's the same almost description of Alalopand, and of the black and bloody faces of the Night's Watch that they find, and the way that Coldhands looks on with his hood, his scarf, and the way he rides the elk. It just all ties back in there. I thought that was kind of wild.
Okay, I'll give you a break.
Thank you.
Okay, so when it came to Coldhands, I did feel like the same way with the Bran felt like. I felt like it was like what I mentioned before, that it did go up from the Durdan area, the Stormlands, and then it creeps its way up and up and up and up. So you brought that up, and when you were bringing it up, all I kept thinking about was Theon Stark, because I have Theon Stark in my head from doing all this research, is the heads on spikes. Again, proving that really Andals didn't take over the land, they only took over certain parts. Also, when it came to how the cave is, when you were bringing up the mystical properties of it, all I kept thinking of is of ley lines, which are supposed to emit paranormal experiences. So maybe that has to do with it too. Like there's those lines in there that give you an extra oomph of energy, and maybe this is why Melisandre is also tied to that. Maybe that's why, like, if you were to draw a map, maybe that's where the ley line is, or diagonally or something. Like, it's got to be somewhere. Maybe that's why she's gathering so much energy. Maybe it's not the wall itself, but maybe where this ley line lands, or the river. Hold on, and there was something else I wanted to bring up. When you bring up like trees and stuff like that too, when I look at things with trees in it, or like quotes, you're into the ironwood a lot. So when I read this quote, I instantly thought that it had something to do with it. It said, "A black hand fumbled at his face, another at his belly. Its fingers felt like iron. He's going to rip my guts out." From this quote alone, I feel like ironwood trees are almost like Bran eats the paste of the weirwood. For me, if you were to do the same thing, almost, you would eat something that resembles iron to get that effect. So maybe it is ironwood, like instead of like how the show represents that it is dragon ass shoved through Benjen's heart, maybe it's like sort of like a stake. Maybe it's some sort of vampire-esque thing going on. Yeah, so that was my point on that. When it came to, I would like to bring up one more thing, because I feel like I haven't brought it up. I'm just going to quote it really quickly. It's from Leaf. "I was born in the time of the dragons, and for 200 years I walked the world of men to watch and listen and learn. I might be walking still, but my legs were sore and my heart was weary, so I turned my feet for home." Now, when I was thinking about this, of course, like I brought up before of Genesis and Cain walking the land of Nod forever and everything like that. But I also came across the devil's footprints, the hooves, right? How sometimes there are things across the world that like people will see like weird hooves in just random places, and they're like, what the hell? And then you also have the Jersey Devil, which matches that. And I do find it weird that there's huge ass bats and their skeletons hanging from the ceiling, which would also resemble the Jersey Devil on top of that. And then you have Bigfoot, obviously, if you're talking about a man in black furs. Like, it kind of resembles Coldhands when you look at it like that, and him walking around with these huge moccasins or whatever he's wearing. Of course, they're going to look like Bigfoot shoes, right? So, yeah, that's how I kind of went down the rabbit hole. Please, someone say something.
That's so great. Sorry, I was trying to get unmuted. That's really great. Nan, do you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say I have one thing I was going to quote. Let me find it. Here it is. And this is them explaining to Bran. Said, "Men live their lives trapped in an external present, the mist of memory, and the sea of shadows. That is all we know of the days to come." And then it goes on to talk about how a weirwood will live forever if it's left undisturbed. And I thought that was pretty neat, because we had talked about the shadows. And, you know, the shadows are the past, shadows of the past. And that just brings it right back again. That was it.
The shadows are interesting because the shadows seem to be the others, and they also seem to be saying again that you need light to see light, you need dark, or you need light in order to have darkness, you need darkness in order to have light. Above, so below, you know, microcosm, macrocosm. So I had a quote about the ironwoods that was so interesting, and I can't find it now, but yeah, oh, here it is Huron chapter, I think, in A Feast for Crows. He mentions that he's seen a god carved from cedar wood, and that it's either a tree face, because they have the faces too. I think, or it's the Lion of Night statue, because he seems to be the first Night's King, or the first known god-like figure who's of the others. The Lion of Night, to me, it's like lions are representative of royalty, of kings, and he's the Lion of Night. So to me, that's just Night's King. And then he says, you know, and it's always the Lion of Night and his demons. Once the maiden made of light turned her back on the world, the Lion of Night and his demons came. So in Norse mythology, there's a forest called the Ironwood Forest, and it's from the story of Ragnarok, which we all know is a big part of this. And it's all covered over. Let's see, it says the Ironwood Forest is a description as the forest east of Midgard, which is the human realm. Ironwood, that forest. It's where the marked whose children were werewolves and trolls lived, and the two brothers who were wolves who devoured the sun and the moon at the last battle of Ragnarok were. So that's like, wow, is that like Bran and John, or that's just crazy that the Ironwood Forest in Ragnarok is where the marked whose children were werewolves lived. So it's like the Starks or the others live in. And so it just, yeah, it keeps I keep finding these things that say the Ironwoods have something to do with the others, or something to do with the way they were made, or a way they can watch something.
Okay, I'll jump in on that.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so when they are on the journey to the cave, Coldhands specifically says something to them that the nighttime brings different shadows, and it's sort of in line with what you're saying. And I'm wondering the same thing with the R'hllora aspect and with Stannis and everything like that. Is can you bring, because it is said that the Night's King did give his seed or his soul to someone, which is technically what Stannis did with Melisandre. So I'm wondering if you knew that there was going to be a threat on your life down the line, could you make a shadow that could stay in hibernation, or a stasis of some kind, that could eventually ward off the people that are going to eventually kill you? Like, because it seems weird to me that Coldhands is constantly going on these like little journeys all the time, and you don't really know. And there's that one instance where he comes across a bunch of Night's Watch members. It seems like there was more going on, and he wasn't letting them know about it. Like, ignorance is bliss. Like, he wasn't letting them know the dire threat that they were in. And when it came to that also, this is from Sir Davos to Maester Crescent. The Red Woman has seen victory in her flames, so Stannis means to press his claim, no matter what the numbers. Before she's done, we're all like to see what Patchface saw. I fear the bottom of the sea, which again matches what Brynden River said. I'm trying to find it. Basically, he says that, like, it's more prevalent in the show where if you stay in the sea too long, you're gonna drown, which is like kind of like memories, but in the books, the mist is the memory, right? And we see this through Catelyn and everyone else, that this mist is a ghost. They are memories, and same with Jaime. Jaime sees mists when he sees his old king's brothers, and he sees Cersei and Tywin and all these other people. So they're mists. They're in the past. But Brynden Rivers refers to the future as a sea. So could you drown in a sea? Right? So it kind of ties into what Patchface says, like under the sea, blah, 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 which is in the future, blah, 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 will happen. So it makes sense in that regard. So yeah.
Yeah,
Also,
it really does make. Do you want to go ahead, Nan, please?
Also, when you talk about the seas in the Bible, the seas can be interpreted as people, as a group of a sea of people. So, can he drown? Can he drown in a sea of people?
Oh, see, that's my fear. That's like the worst fear, is that these like people are all under the sea and they're just waiting to march out. It's the way Ragnarok ends, is with water covering everything. There's alive. And I don't know how that's supposed to work, how you're supposed to continue a species with two men, but anyway, it's weird that that's the same way that ends.
I also found something that Stefi and I were talking about earlier, and that when I was doing the reread, I had found was about Celeste. When she leaves Eastwatch by the sea, she comes to Castle Black, and she tells Jon Snow that they had, Jon's telling her that there's more hospitality at the Eastwatch. It's more for there. And she tells Jon that that's where the battle will begin, that she's seen it in the flames. And even Patchface says something to the fact that that's where the battle will begin. And Stefi had pointed out that Hardhome is just north of there.
I agree. Nan just killed it.
Yeah. Great points. It's true. I think that I think there's a lot of the War of Heaven in here too. And the same thing as Ragnarok. It's the twilight of the gods. The War in Heaven, it's a lot the same. And Lucifer comes in, and I had a quote here about when Lucifer fell. It's just really interesting. It has to do, well, let's see. It says, there's a fine line between good and evil. When you try to separate good and evil, you get black and white. And when you get black and white, you get gray. The middle line, the line the world rests itself on, so very fragile. A bribe here, a bribe there, a transportation of goods from one to another, everything breaks. Every wall, every zone collapses. So that's why Lucifer fell, why he saw what he saw in us, in people. The good charge and the bad were never really bad. Placed in the world with possibilities. When you have the possibility of who you may be, you may become someone else entirely. So that's really interesting, having to do with the third eye opening, having to do with visions, and maybe to do with the paste and why, if that does induce visions, like the shade of the evening, it makes sense that it might have an hallucinogenic property to it, just like the shade of the evening does. Although you're not seeing hallucinations per se, you're just seeing it. But there is a drug that, it's a plant that grows wild called ibogaine. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm not sure, but it's something that people use it actually to cure addiction. And that takes you down to your deepest part of your soul so that you can get to the root of why you have an addiction problem or an alcohol problem or a problem with whatever. So it made me wonder a little bit about it when I started reading up on that, if it's not something kind of like this that takes you down within yourself, and within that you end up, Bran first ends up at Winterfell watching Ned clean ice, saying, Dad, Father, he's there, and not really understanding that he's seeing the past. But I noticed the fact that he didn't talks about the present too. I thought that was interesting. So,
Okay.
Lucifer part.
Yeah, I got that too, like Paradise Lost, like Genesis, and the whole like apocalypse and the Twilight of the Gods, the Greek gods, the Roman gods, whatever you want to go after. You can basically throw it at this book and it's somehow in there. But when it comes to the book, I do agree. You're talking about the quote I said before, he's gone, boy, do not seek to call him back from death, right? Like, when these gods are dead, they're going to be dead and you shouldn't do anything. As for, I'd like to bring up Theon a little more, since you involved the present in that. I do believe Theon has something to do with Bran later on, whether it's death or redemption. I do think that it does make sense that Coldhands might be Theon Stark in the revelation of Theon seeing Bran now. So like the timelines sort of blend together of this redemption arc. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Stefi. I think that Theon's going to have a bigger role to play than we really ever thought. And me too. And very interesting, the way like you said, he even had a little bit of a mustache on his face, and the trees had more faces carved in them. And there was a couple other things. Maybe with child that emerged naked and dripping from the black pool, knelt before the tree and begged the old gods for a son who would avenge her. And because it was earlier in the time frame, I didn't know if it was possibly one of the, like the Ward King or something like that, the daughters of the Ward King that they had possibly married, but that was too far back in time. Then I thought maybe this is Lyanna, and she wasn't at the Tower of Joy all this time, and maybe she was doing a Bell the Bard and hiding in the crypts, and maybe Benjen knew this, and that when she's praying for a son to avenge her, maybe she's praying for a son to avenge her from Robert, what he did and the Mad King did. Not only the Mad King, but Robert as well. And as far as the next one was there came a brown-haired girl, slender as a spear, who stood on the tips of her toes to kiss the lips of a young knight as tall as Hodor. You're right, Stefi. I never thought that was Nan to begin with, because like you said, Nan was a wet nurse when she came there, and she would have not been a young girl when she came there. She would have been an adult woman when she came there. She already had children of her own. Next one, a dark-haired youth, pale and fierce, sliced 3 branches off the weirwood and shaped them into arrows. The tree itself was shrinking, and this I thought was Cregan Stark's. Was it this brother that was a snow that said he would kill the dragons? It seemed like their way of thinking maybe the weirwood arrows would kill the dragons, and thinking in that. And then everything kept getting smaller, and then of course you see the stern men in fur and chainmail. And then I think I agree also that's going back to the first men, the first kings of winter, because Bran actually even recognizes some of the faces at survive before he can recall their names. And then the bearded man with a captive down on his knees before the heart tree, a white-haired woman slipped toward them through a drift of dark red leaves, a bronze sickle in her hand. And she grabbed the captive by the hair, hooked the sickle around his throat, and slashed. But as the life flowed out of him, Bran Stark blood. So he's tasting the blood from this sacrifice that was done probably thousands of years ago. In the present, he's tasting it. And that, I don't have a clue who the woman is unless it is possibly one of the children of the forest, or some of the mixture of the Warg King, children of the forest mixture type thing. And that was basically about it. As far as Theon goes, this is leading with Theon. You know, even in the spoiler alert, in the Theon chapter, Winds of Winter, and he talks about Yara tries to get Stannis to take him in front of the tree. Even the birds are saying, the tree, take him to the tree. So, yeah, I think Theon's going to have a really much bigger role to play, whether it'll be as a sacrifice or whether he'll receive that message in front of the tree with witnesses present. Thing to look forward to. And that's pretty much all I got for now.
Yeah, I like that. I think Theon's important. I think Theon's going to be around for a while. After you go through something like that, how can you... I'm so invested by now. The only thing I wanted to point out just quickly, it's really the last thing I have, is the fact that the interesting part of the switch from lunar deity worship to solar deity worship, it really seems like it's happening right at this time. The bronze woman holding, or the woman holding the bronze sickle, seems like she's from first men times, right? Because they brought bronze. So it seems really old. And if a woman's doing it, then that means she's the shaman, she's the priestess of the tribe. Otherwise it would be a man probably making the sacrifice. So that makes me think of the Morrigan, who is a triple deity. She's also called the Great Queen, and she's got quite a few names. She's the Celtic goddess of war, of death, of battle, of strife, of sovereignty, of rebirth, of fate, and prophecy and magic. And she's also known as the Phantom Queen and the Spectre Queen. Our goddess, she's also associated with frightening aspects of female energy and is often seen as an omen of death. So, to me, that we have a lot of washerwomen who, in mythology, they wash the clothes of the who's about to die. And there's quite a bit of that going on in Theon's chapters, in the Turncloak, I think, chapters, where he's with Mance's spearwives. They're doing a lot of washing of clothes, and a lot of people are dying, and it seems like it's at their hands. And just the fact that she's called the Spectre Queen, the Phantom Queen, and she, another name for her is Brigid, and Brigid is a three-headed goddess also, and her other names are Arya, Eerie, and Eri, which are the names Arya's been called, which are the three ancient names for Ireland. Blew my mind a little bit that maybe Arya is like the soul of Ireland. She's like the soul. She is like the soul of the land in a way. So I thought that was really cool. So that's really all I have, and I just love everything you ladies came up with. This was really, really fun to talk about. What a great collection of chapters.
Okay, I got one more thing to say. So
yeah,
it has to do with what you're saying, because for me, when Coldhands is saying, "I'm your monster, Brandon Stark," like it, and then you have Brandon Stark tasted the blood. When it comes to the last hero and this supposed figure, or it could have been a prophecy given during this time with the Morgan present, who to me, although you said it sounded like Arya in a lot of ways, which it could be in the present tense, but in the past tense, I also have to imagine that the Barrow Kings were also at this time, and they said whoever tried to take the crown, the true king's crown, turned old and skeleton-y and stuff like that, gross and old, right? So it kind of matches that as well. So if it is Edric Snowbeard Stark, then possibly the Brandon that is tasting the blood at this moment could be Brandon Ice Eyes Stark. And the Ice Eyes, how can I put it? That maybe this needed to happen, like this merged of like the druids, like the three symbols coming together had to come together in order for Bran to get this sort of power, to get this sort of gift, that all these events had to happen, right? And it could make sense that Coldhands is also Brandon Ice Eyes Stark. I understand the theories about that, of him being the Night's King and so on and so forth, but just a thought.
So cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think the Ice Eyes thing is has weight.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Well, that's all I have for tonight, ladies. That covers my notes. I think it's been a great discussion, as usual. And I sure do appreciate all of you girls, and I appreciate the chat out there. You people keep us going. We thank you. We are humbled by your presence, and we do appreciate it. Ladies, they can find me here at the She-Wolves of Winter, or Old Nan on Game of Thrones, anytime. Ladies, tell them where you're at.
Thanks, Old Nan. I'm Lady Ashley on the Iron Underneath. You can find me at the Iron Underneath on YouTube. And once again, thank you to the chat for being here as always. We love you. And I love you, ladies. This was a great stream again. It's always so much fun. Thank you.
Thanks for the chat, ladies. Like, this was pretty insightful, I gotta be honest. Definitely have to rewatch this, and I'm sorry for the people that dislike this video, but I guess leave a comment, tell us what we need to fix. If we can do it, we'll do it. If not, then sorry, but thanks for the view. Thanks to the chat as always. You guys are awesome. I've been chatting with you guys all night long. Much fun, and much love to you all. And that's it. And you can find me here. That's the only place I'm at.
Okay. Thank you so much. And we will see you in 2 weeks from today. Good night.